Hey guys, Barak here with another video. Today, we're going to be doing the Enhancement Shaman Season 3 guide for both Mythic Plus and Rating. I spent the last season playing Enhancement Shaman. I got season title, ended the season at 3605 for my Mythic Plus rating. I got cutting edge with my guild on Mythic Sarkareth. I think I got enough under my belt playing Enhancement Shaman all last season to be able to bring you guys some good information. There's going to be a lot of it in this video. We're going to be covering stuff like talents, builds, your stats, right? Trinkets, gear, embellishment, crafted items, right? Add-ons Weakauras, what your rotation, your spell priority is going to be, and tips and tricks for your Enhancement Shaman. There's going to be a lot of information. I'll leave timestamps in the video for you guys so you can skip through sections that you're interested in. But if you like the content, like the video, comment down below what your thoughts are for Enhancement Shaman going into Season 3. They're looking really freaking good for both Raid and Mythic Plus. Subscribe to my content, hit that noti bell so you get live notifications for when I upload new items. And please consider subscribing to my Twitch page or my Patreon page to support my content. Really helps me keep the lights on here, make new content for you guys as well with my editor, David. And it really helps me out. So I'll leave the links to all those in the description down below. Without further ado, let's get into it. To start out, I wanted to quickly go over the changes that Enhancement Shaman in the new patch are receiving and how this evolves our gameplay. Some very important talents have been moved around the tree, so you may have noticed Elemental Blast, Wind Fury Totem, Sundering, all have new homes on the Enhancement Shaman tree. We also have a new talent choice node between Elemental Blast and Tempest Strikes. This is a new passive ability or passive talent that incentivizes our Storm single target build. Our Elemental Assault talent now also interacts with Lava Lash and Ice Strike, which significantly buffs the Maelstrom weapon generation that we get in single target, makes it a lot more consistent, and we like that. As well, our frost damage is also increased when the Legacy of the Frost Wolf or Legacy of the Frost Witch buff is active. Additionally, Primordial Wave's initial damage has been increased by 500%, and Splintered Elements got tuned, so now it gives 20% base haste increased, and you get an additional 4% extra haste for each subsequent lightning bolt generated from your Primordial Wave. We are losing our tier 30 set bonus, which tied a big damage amp to our Sundering ability and empowered our next two Chain Lightning spells. But this also means that you're no longer going to have to cast Chain Lightning in very specific single target scenarios, so you don't need to worry about interaction anymore and how it complicates or overly complicates the spell priority. None of that anymore. The new tier 31 set bonuses create an exciting gameplay feedback loop between summoning our wolves with feral spirits and Primordial Wave, which emphasizes the Elementalist playstyle and talents like Elemental Spirits and Elemental Blast. So obviously the Storm build doesn't benefit as much from this patch's changes, but it's still pretty good. That being said, because this patch favors the Elementalist build, that is the one we're going to be covering in today's video. If you would like to get more information on the Storm build because that is your preferred playstyle, I'm sorry I'm not covering it in this video, but I will leave a link to Word Up's Wowhead guide and Icy Veins guide in the video's description down below so you can refer to that to get more information on it. All right, let's cover talents. With the tuning changes going from 10.1.7 to 10.2, along with a new tier set giving us more synergies with the Elementalist build, this season we are going to be playing more of a Roll the Wolves playstyle and benefiting a lot from the infinite cooldown reduction positive feedback loop I was talking about earlier between Feral Spirits and Primordial Wave cooldowns. Since Primordial Wave now summons a Lightning Feral Spirit, which buffs our nature damage when it hits the target. So when Primordial Wave hits the target, it summons the spirit. Each Feral Spirit also reduces the remaining cooldown on Primordial Wave. This means we're going to be leaning heavy into elemental damage and generating as much Maelstrom as possible to increase our CDR further through Witch Doctor's Ancestry and our Feral Spirit's ability. Picking up Splintered Elements and Elemental Spirits as our two capstone talents will boost our consistent burst damage windows. We will also be leaning into a more funnel type damage with Hot Hands, Ashen Catalyst, and Lashing Flames. In Mythic Plus or Cleave style scenarios or raid bosses, you also want to pick up Crash Lightning and Crashing Storms to increase our Chain Lightning damage and AoE. With talents now moved around, we should be also picking up Elemental Blast without any hindrance and maintaining our main build components, so definitely spec into it. Hailstorm and Ice Strike are great talents since they boost frost shock damage and increase both sustained AoE and single target when you compare it to the easier to play Fire build or Fire Nova talent. Though, if you have initial problems with the difficulty of playing around Hailstorm and Ice Strike, you can get away with playing Fire Nova in the beginning until you get more comfortable with it. There are 2 talent points that offer consistent Maelstrom generation in your rotation, that being Elemental Assault and Swirling Maelstrom. Elemental Assault provides the most consistent Maelstrom generation when it comes to pure single target, so obviously you're going to want to run 2 out of 2 points for this one in Raid, and you can make a point for it in Mythic Plus also. It's really good in there as well. The only reason you would ever run Sundering now is if your group needs additional CC, and with the rise of Vengeance Demon Hunter and all of their crazy runes that they have in crowd control, it's very unlikely you're going to need it, but if you do need it, just take 1 point out of Elemental Assault and put it into Sundering. Swirling Maelstrom gives our Ice Strike a guaranteed Maelstrom generation along with Frost Shock as long as we're using it with Hailstorm. Although, the only time you're ever really going to be using Swirling Maelstrom is now in either in Raid or if you're using the Legacy of the Frost Switch talent. We'll talk about that in a little bit. All this additional Maelstrom generation means additional cooldown reduction on Feral Spirits, thanks to Witch Doctor's Wolf Ancestry,
and which means we get more cooldown reduction on Primordial Wave, because when we summon spirits, we get that on Primordial Wave, which means
we get more cooldown reduction on Feral Spirits, because Primordial Wave is now generating Maelstrom thanks to Primal Maelstrom talent.
And it's just a positive feedback loop. I'm sure you get the picture now. It's fantastic. It's super fun to play. Also, if you're in a melee comp in Mythic Plus, consider using Wind Fury Totem and just switching 1 point out of Elemental Assault into that, but also use it in Raid, obviously. So a side note for the Legacy of the Frost Witch talent, like I mentioned earlier, there are stirrings of a slight alteration in the talents that you would take. You would no longer take Lashing Flames and focus on spreading your Lashing Flames dot or debuff on targets that are affected by your Flame Shock, and focus more on like a Hailstorm damage contribution build. So you would take Swirling Maelstrom in Mythic Plus and 2 points into Legacy of the Frost Witch instead of Elemental Assault. You lose out on just a small amount of AoE from this and a little bit of single target, but you gain a decent amount of funnel damage and you don't have to worry about maintaining Lashing Flames on all of your targets. So it's definitely an easier build to play, but keep in mind that your Hailstorm empowered Frost Shocks take priority now over your Lava Lash in a lot of situations. So I definitely recommend that kind of play style to somebody that's new to Enhance, or they're in a key that's way too difficult to play as melee and they can't really maintain all the Lashing Flames buff. Man, I wish that this was available back in last season when we had Braconite Hollow, because that place was a nightmare for melee and anybody that had short arms. So let's move on. All right, let's cover the talents that you're going to need to take in your Shaman tree. Obviously, there's a lot of niche utility talents in the Shaman tree, but the main ones you definitely want to grab are things like Astral Shift, because it's our main defensive CD, Flurry, because it increases our attack speed, and we are an enhancement shaman. Frost Shock, if you're going to be running the Hailstorm, and Ice Strike talents, obviously. Plains Traveler to reduce the cooldown on Astral Shift and the uptime on it. Ancestral Defense for more survivability, along with Nature's Guidance, which is your pseudo cheat death for survivability. Earth Elemental also adds a little bit of survivability on top of it as well, because you get increased health when you have it summoned, and it can take some pressure off the tank for a little. Fire and Ice is your damage increase output talent that you need to really take, and Elemental Warning makes us a little bit more tanky against magic. Brimming with Life is a great health increase and lowers the cooldown on our next defensive ability, Reincarnate. Yes, it's a defensive ability. Ancestral Guidance converts damage into healing. That's great. Use it. Nature's Fury. Increase the crit chance of your nature spells, which includes, obviously, Lightning Bolt. Those things hit hard with Primordial Wave, so let's increase them crits. Spirit Walk can be really useful to remove debuffs that also daze and have a dot associated with them, or get you out of roots, or just allow you to move quicker, get to a safe spot. You're better at positioning if you're faster, right? And in Mythic Plus, Thunderstorm with Thundershock always should be taken. It provides additional CC, it has a slow effect to it, it knocks things up, right? Perfect. Thunderstorm. Now let's talk about the optional talents that you would take in either Raid or Mythic Plus. Chain Heal and Earth Shield together are obviously really good in raiding scenarios where you're going to be taking either consistent damage. You just got to remember to keep this on you at all times. You could also run Elemental Orbit to have both Earth Shield and Lightning Shield on you at the same time, but it's not really that necessary. Just run Earth Shield. The boss isn't going to hit you anyway. Purge, obviously it's an optional one. Definitely take this where you need to dispel magic debuffs. It does happen sometimes in raids, just like Razageth, you could purge orbs to get rid of them. But this is obviously going to be a really good, useful talent, like in dungeons like Atal Dazar or Waycrest Manor. Cleanse Spirit. Most helpful in dungeons like Waycrest Manor where there's a bunch of curses to dispel. I haven't used this yet in raid, but it's possible that we might find something. Thunderous Paws or Spirit Wolf. Now this is a kind of coin flip depending on what you need from this choice note here. Spirit Wolf is great for when you need to run indoor dungeons, right? I use this in like Throne of Tides or Waycrest Manor because you can't mount in places like those. You can also use Thunderous Paws in places where Spirit Walk is also going to be a useful ability. So Thunderous Paws can get rid of daze effects that also have a dot on them. You can use this in Waycrest Manor, right? On the third boss, I believe, or Lord Waycrest, I think he's the fourth boss. Lord Waycrest, he puts a dot that also slows on players. And then when you dispel it, it leaves behind a swirly. I forget the name of it, but like Thunderous Paws can get rid of that dot easily. And it's a disease, so there's not many disease dispels. Thunderous Paws helps with that. Capacitor Totem or Guardian's Cudgel. This is kind of like a toss-up on what you need. Guardian's Cudgel is great for consistent follow-up CC, whereas Capacitor Totem and Static Charge, right, the additional cooldown reduction on it. So you need to just be careful with running Guardian's Cudgel, because if your group already has a whole lot of AoE stuns, you don't really need it. So maybe just run Static Charge instead. Windrush Totem or Earth Grab Totem. This is definitely a niche pick for sure. I like running Windrush Totem because you can speed up your group, helps with indoor dungeons or when your tank needs to run around gathering a whole bunch of mobs, right? Windrush helps with that. Or if you need to move out of a mechanic very quickly as a group and you're already stacked up, helps with that as well. Great boost to movement speed. Now, Earth Grab Totem, it's barely ever used. It was used in one dungeon in season 1, which was the No-Coot Offensive, right? You can Earthbind mobs before they charge to somebody to put a bleed on them. You could also do it in Vortex Pinnacle, but it was very, very hard to do. So I haven't found any place where this is useful in this season, but if I do, I'll put it in a tips and tricks guide. Hex and Voodoo Mastery. I use these two talents to get to my Spirit Walk because I don't really need Alakir's Gust thing, Alakir's movement speed thing. I don't have 4 totems out at one time usually, so I don't really benefit from that other talent tree there. So Hex has very minimal uses. You can use it to CC padding mobs so that they don't move anymore, or if you have no other CC available and something needs to be interrupted on a humanoid beast or dragonkin, I guess it covers as well, you can hex it to interrupt the spell. Very, very niche though. I barely use it. Poison Cleansing Totem. Most helpful in dungeons like Waycrest Manor where there's going to be poisons on it, or on afflicted weeks. I have yet to see how this is going to be useful in raid. Like I said, very niche talent. Totemic Projection. This one's really only mandatory in raid because when you're moving around a boss room, you can off the GCD replace your Wind Fury Totem, which is very useful. Or if you're in a melee heavy Mythic Plus group and you need to run Wind Fury Totem in there, Totemic Projection can help you with that. It also makes an easy path to Poison Cleansing Totem if the same week you need to pick that up. Stone Skin Totem. This is a optional but actually high value and underappreciated talent. It's fantastic in higher keys. I used it all last season because I was pushing higher keys, and obviously the benefit of this talent scales with how high your key is, right? Because the higher your key, the more damage you're taking. The more damage you're taking, it's probably physical damage that the tank is taking or everybody else is taking. So Stone Skin Totem scales really well in Mythic Plus, obviously. So if there's high physical damage, either it's party damage or it's raid damage, or it's just tank damage, or it's individual player damage like a bleed or something, Stone Skin Totem can actually help with that. Take a look at the dungeon, see if it's going to be helpful in there. Take it if it is. If not, probably go Earth Shield or something. So to recap on talents, I'll show you which builds you want to play in Mythic Plus and which build you want to play in single target or raid scenarios. And that way you can kind of see the difference between them. There's not much of a difference, but there is a little bit. I will also put the loadouts to each talent build in the video's description down below so that you guys can reference it. All right, stat weights. We're going to be covering a lot here because stat weights this season are a little bit tricky. We need to keep in mind that for the amount of stats that we're actually getting from the gear, It's scaled up way higher. The item level difference this season compared to last season is a massive jump in item level. So this means that we're more likely to hit some harder diminishing returns on our stats like mastery and haste. So it's important to understand the stat weights and what diminishing returns do to properly gear your character accordingly and moving forward. Now, to explain, we start to lose value on haste at around 5100 rating or 30%. For crit and mastery, it's around 5400 rating when we start to lose some of the value there. And for versatility, we lose value at around 6150 rating. All these values are easily obtainable in the season alone, if not maybe some of them together, but I'm sure you get the idea. During the PTR, I was testing gear sets and I was actually able to get upwards of like 130% mastery thanks to procs and buffs and stuff like that, which at that level, it's a crazy amount of diminishing return. I think it's somewhere around like 30%, which is a lot of lost value in that stat. So I would recommend learning how to simulate your character using the Simulation Craft add-on and the Raidbot website to avoid this problem, so you're not wasting stats essentially. I have an old video on my YouTube channel that covers how to simulate your character accurately to understand what your current stat weights are for like AoE, Mythic, not really Mythic Plus because you can't simulate that accurately, but AoE or single target, right? I'll leave it in the cards on the video so you can check it out in the top right corner of the screen and start simming your character. Since we're going into an elementalist build, we want as many stats that benefit that damage profile. Thankfully, our mastery just scales our base elemental damage up, which is almost all of our damage using the elementalist build. So we want as much of it as possible until diminishing return says otherwise. Haste would be our second most important and valuable stat as it lowers the global cooldown for our spells and actually the cooldown for most of our core abilities like Flame Shock, Ice Strike, Lava Lash, Storm Strike, Frost Shock, Crash Lightning, right? All those abilities are lowered by haste. Their cooldown is lowered by haste. So more cast of these spells obviously means more Maelstrom weapon stacks generated and the positive feedback loop I was talking about earlier. Versatility directly increases our base damage and provides a slight boost to our survivability with damage taken reduced. In Mythic Plus, we have very limited defensives and survivability, so we rely heavily on communicating with our team when damage is going out or we're out of cooldowns or we need additional help, right? Versatility helps to mitigate that just a little bit further, so it's a really good stat to have. Crit doesn't provide as much benefit as the other three stats when it comes to Mythic Plus and Raid early on, so we kind of have this as last priority until you start to hit diminishing returns and it gains values. You'll know this once you check out the sims on your character and you've geared your character essentially to either heroic or mythic level gear, and you kind of see what stats you're at. So crit is our lowest until further notice. All right, for gearing our character, this is where we're going to get into it. For trinkets, you want anything that's going to provide you a passive damage increase since our damage profile is more consistently high and we have short cooldown burst windows. Using an unused trinket this season just makes a little bit less sense due to there being great passive stat proc trinkets options available. Though you could make a case for when you need to have some serious burst damage in some fights or there's burst windows in raid, right? You could make a case for using unused trinkets during those moments. Hip's Emerald Friendship Badge that drops from the Council of Dreams in the Amirdrasil raid is going to be your best overall rounded trinket choice. So you want to prioritize getting this as soon as you can. I would also suggest grabbing the Porcelain Crab that drops from Throne of Tides. This is a agility-based trinket that gives you a mastery proc. It's fantastic for Mythic Plus. Another raid trinket that provides the best single target damage increase is going to be the Cataclysmic Signet Brand. I know this trinket got nerfed recently in a tuning pass, but I believe it is still our first option when it comes to pure single target. A good mention for unused trinkets would either be the PvP badge from Conquest or getting the Witherbark's branch from the Everbloom dungeon. These are fantastic items. I prefer the Witherbark's branch because it gives you passive agility. Good stat. All right, crafted items and embellishments. What are we talking about here? So with the new season comes a new spark item, which also means that the crafted item level on crafted gear or the item level on crafted gear is a lot higher in the season. What does this mean? It's important to know what items are your highest priority so that you don't waste your early sparks on your character because you only have a limited amount of them. So you should try and craft your weapons first with haste and mastery stats because those are our main stats. And then you should also consider putting a Fang Adornment on your first crafted weapon because this is going to provide a little bit of boost to damage and you can replace it later on. Your second priority for crafted is going to be your adaptive Draconthus arm guards. This is a great embellishment for Enhancement Shaman and Elemental, so you can use it there too. And a final priority should be crafting a gear slot on your weakest slot, preferably something that can hold like your Shadow Flame tempered armor patch. This is going to be a really great embellishment for raid. It provides a decent boost to single target. And with all of the embellishments that are damaging embellishments being nerfed recently, this one is still very competitive for raiding. Talking about embellishments, there's been a lot of nerfs, specifically speaking to the Spore Cloak. This thing got nerfed into the ground. It's a poor choice, so you probably don't want to run it anymore, and you're better off using like a passive damage increase instead. So passive damage increases for embellishments. We already talked about the adaptive bracers. This is going to be your adaptive Draconthus arm guards. This is going to be your best all-around embellishment. You want to craft this as early as possible. Another notable one is definitely the Elemental Lariat. This gives you a good controlled stat increase. You can either proc it for haste or mastery as long as we're putting earth gems in our sockets, but this embellishment only becomes competitive once we reach around 6 or more sockets on our gear. So if you don't have those early enough, maybe don't use it. Maybe run Shadow Flame tempered armor patch instead, and then use it a little bit later. It's important to note though that the Lariat becomes less valuable once you get your hands on the Eye of the Rising Flame necklace that drops from the Tindral, what is his name? Tindral Sage Swift, yes, in the Emergisil raid. If you're thinking of going for the Horizon Strider set, this set is okay to use in the beginning, but you'll want to craft the belt and shoulders since the tier gloves that you're getting from the raid or Mythic Plus have mastery on them and you want mastery, right? Whereas the shoulders for tier do not have mastery, so you can easily get the shoulders slot for the Horizon Strider set. Unfortunately, if you use this set, you will inevitably lose out on too much potential mastery on your gear because you're going to have to acquire the 4 set somehow, right? And your helmet slot, which has no mastery, is going to be needed to complete your 4 set. If you are looking for something as far as a mastery boost, the engineering goggles with mastery provide 10% mastery alone just from that headpiece, which is a lot of base damage. You can also get the leatherworking mail helmet, which gives you around 5% mastery and 3% haste, comparatively to the tier helmet, obviously, which provides no haste or mastery, just crit and versatility. All right, spell priorities and rotations. Now, Enhancement Shaman at first glance seems complicated due to the juggling and what looks like many buffs and stacks while maintaining debuffs on enemies and keeping several spells on cooldowns while not wasting Maelstrom or resources. It's a lot, I understand, it can be overwhelming. There are oversimplified ways that you can play Enhancement, and then there are extra hard dot management min-maxing ways to play Enhancement. We're going to be kind of covering both. So when you get started, I would recommend the former for Enhancement Shaman and ease into the min-maxing to get, once you get comfortable with the playstyle, ease into the Lashing Flame dot management, ease into that. Not only are there many things to juggle, but your positioning is extremely important in AoE due to your spells cleaving in a cone in front of you, not around you like a lot of other melee classes have, thanks to the effects of Crash Lightning buff. This buff is maintained when your Crash Lightning hits 2 or more targets, and what's great about Enhancement Shaman is its rotation differs very little between single target and AoE. So if you know your single target rotation, the only things you're going to be replacing is Elemental Blast with Chain Lightning most of the time, and maintaining your Crash Lightning buff on your character. Everything else is pretty much the same. To start out, you will want to always have Flame Shock on your main target and Lava Lash to spread your Flame Shock when you're fighting multiple targets. You will also be applying Lashing Flames on your targets if you're spec'd into this, obviously. Lashing Flames increases the damage of your Flame Shock on the target, and to min-max, you can actually apply this debuff and maintain it to all of your targets affected by your Flame Shock. But the simplest way, obviously, is to just cast Lava Lash into your priority target, which leads me into our next point, Funnel damage. With Ashen Catalyst, your Flame Shock ticks reduce the remaining cooldown of your Lava Lash and increase its damage, stacking up to 8 times. With this buff, you can essentially funnel extra damage from all of your extra Flame Shocks into a single target using Lava Lash when it comes off cooldown. And in AoE, your Lava Lash comes off cooldown so Enhancement Shaman has the best funnel damage profile in the game thanks to this interaction. It's pretty cool. You will build Maelstrom with Lava Lash, Storm Strike, and Ice Strike mainly, obviously with Crash Lightning as well. When you spend Maelstrom, you gain stacks of Hailstorm if it's talented. This increases the damage of your Frost Shock and makes it cleave up to 6 targets total. It's fantastic. Ice Strike will also increase its damage even further. So in AoE scenarios, you will most likely be casting Frost Shock twice as much as Ice Strike just due to Frost Shock having a shorter cooldown. Meaning, if Ice Strike is unavailable and you have Hailstorm stacks, you can use Frost Shock if it is off cooldown. Keep in mind though that you can actually delay the cast of Frost Shock if you are at low Maelstrom, meaning you just dumped all your Maelstrom and you have Hailstorm now, and Ice Strike will be back up in time to empower that Frost Shock before you cap on Maelstrom again. When spec'd into Hailstorm and Ice Strike, Frost Shock will be your #1 damage contribution in your overall when it comes to cleave and AoE fights or Mythic Plus. If it's not, I swear you're doing something wrong. With all the prerequisite information and how things kind of work and play out in the spec out of the way, let's get into the actual spell priority for a single target in AoE. So this priority is assuming that you have the tier 31 set equipped because we're in season 3 now. I will display the priority spell sequence on screen for you and then provide a simplified explanation to go along with it. This priority spell rotation is pretty much use Lava Lash when it's available during Hot Hands procs. Keep in mind that you can normally cast 1 spell in between each cast of Lava Lash at normal haste values. But if you're under the effects of, let's say, like Bloodlust or PI or something like that, you can pretty much cast Lava Lash on cooldown per GCD, like every GCD during your Hot Hands window. That's pretty great. Use Elemental Blast at high Maelstrom, but only while your wolves are out, and do not waste your Primordial Wave buff with Lightning Bolt if you have low weapon stacks. Try and get this at least 5 or more. Use Ice Strike to empower every Frost Shock, but only use Frost Shock when you have Hailstorm stacks available. Then cast your other spells as filler that are not your higher priority spells, like Lava Lash, outside of Hot Hands obviously, Storm Strike, right? You can refresh your Flame Shock, you can Frost Shock with no Hailstorm stacks after that. You have a little bit of stuff that you can do. For AoE, you want to spread your Flame Shocks to 6 targets as soon as possible if you have upwards of 6 targets or more. Keep Primordial Wave and Feral Spirits on cooldown and use Lightning Bolt with high stacks of Maelstrom weapon when you have the Primordial Wave buff. If you have 3 or less targets, it is actually more damage to use Elemental Blast instead of Chain Lightning, but just make sure that your wolves are out. Your Maelstrom will be capped at 10 very quickly in AoE scenarios, so you will want to cast Chain Lightning often to consume them. But if your priority target needs to die and needs to die quick, it's also better for the group for you to send your Elemental Blast at 10 Maelstrom weapon stacks into that target while your wolves are out, obviously. Maintaining the Crash Lightning buff is a must-have and should be up as much as possible, only really ever letting it fall if you need to dump Maelstrom with a Chain Lightning or LE Blast, because those spells are not benefited by Crash Lightning. Just like in single target, you'll want to apply Lashing Flames and maintain that debuff. As mentioned before, to min-max, you will apply Lashing Flames to as many targets afflicted by Flame Shock as possible. But if you want to simplify the rotation and funnel damage, just spam Lava Lash into your main target. Use Ice Strike when it is available to generate Maelstrom weapon stacks and buff your next Frost Shock, and then obviously Frost Shock comes next here, but with Hailstorm stacks. Then from here, fill your globals with things like Storm Strike or Crash Lightning, and if you're using the Fire Nova talent instead of Hailstorm and Ice Strike, it would probably be next in priority after your Crash Lightning buff maintenance. Just make sure you're using that Fire Nova ability with as many Flame Shocks out as possible. A side note, as mentioned before in the talent section, if you're running the Legacy of the Frost Wolf talent instead of Lashing Flames and Elemental Assault, you would prioritize Ice Strike and Hailstorm empowered Frost Shocks after spending Maelstrom with Chain Lightning or Elemental Blast. All right, with Augmentation Evokers so prevalent last season and likely to be also in this season, it's important to track when the Evoker is going to be using abilities like Breath of Eons and your Ebonmite uptime. You do not want to send your cooldowns too early and miss out on the additional damage that Breath of Eons can provide during your burst windows. So, with your cooldowns being up so often, just be diligent with the timing, especially during large pulls. You don't want to waste damage. Also, familiarize yourself with the pulls in the dungeons that you're going to be using Bloodlust in. Obviously, there's going to be either big pulls or on certain bosses. This cooldown adds significant damage and healing throughput for your group or for your raid, so you don't want to waste it. You're only going to get a few of these in each Mythic Plus dungeon. All right, some tips and tricks for you. I mentioned this a little bit before, but in this section, I quickly want to touch upon some ideas that I believe are worth talking about. When it comes to your unbeatable funnel damage, and gosh, we are good at it, we will fill an important role in the group comp for Mythic Plus to absolutely destroy a target, a priority target. Now, in our Mythic Plus or our AoE spell rotation section, we mentioned how to spend our Maelstrom weapon stacks. This priority goes over the highest potential damage output, but doesn't cover unique scenarios. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. If it's more beneficial or more important for the group to annihilate, absolutely destroy a dangerous enemy as soon as possible, rather than padding the meters and looking better on your overall. If you don't time a key because your group wiped to a specific pack of mobs because dangerous mobs should have died earlier and you could have prevented that by just dealing more funnel damage, that's something you could have prevented. That's your fault. So instead of spending all Maelstrom on Chain Lightning in every single AoE pull or every single big trash pull, you should consider using Elemental Blast on a priority target if it needs to die until you've run out of either stacks of Elemental Blast or your wolves are no longer out, right? Either of those scenarios. Obviously, you can't cast Elemental Blast if you don't have it, right? So consider the implications of your funnel damage. This also goes for when you pull trash mobs onto bosses. If there are mechanics or moments where you need to swap targets very quickly and kill something quickly, consider pooling your Maelstrom before those moments happen and then switch to them right away and use your hard-hitting Elemental Blast while your wolves are out to just destroy that target immediately. An example of this would be the Soulbound Goliath in Waycrest Manor. The boss will target a random player, usually prioritizing DPS players, and then stun them with a root that must be killed, or the player is going to die because they're ticking out, they can't do anything, they're just stunned, right? You can easily kill this quickly by pulling Maelstrom before this happens, and then sending out that Elemental Blast immediately into the target when it spawns. This also segues me into my next tip. For this boss specifically, did you know that as a Shaman, you can immune this ability altogether? All you need to do is go into Ghost Wolf as he's casting the ability, because he doesn't target somebody, right? You don't know on your player frames who he's targeting, but he does put it on a random DPS player mostly. You can immune this by just shifting into Ghost Wolf. Druids can do this too by shifting into cat form or bear form or whatever, if you're a druid healer or something. And you just won't get stunned, right? The root doesn't show up, you don't get stunned, you just go on your merry way, and your group is like, whoa, what happened, right? This has been an interaction since Battle for Azeroth, so I know it's there to stay. But if they do end up changing it, that would really suck, because it's a really good, unique interaction, and I like it. All right, add-ons and Weakauras, the nitty-gritty of the back-end stuff. I would definitely recommend having at least a Maelstrom weapon tracker and maybe a cooldown tracker, so you're not staring at your bars and your player frame the entire time while you're doing a rotation and trying to pay attention to all this other crap on your screen, right? Definitely recommend it, right? So that you're playing a little bit better, you're not overcapping on your Maelstrom, you know when your CDs are actually coming up, and you're able to pay attention to everything else that's also going on your screen. Hopefully you have a clean UI, maybe. We'll see. I recommend using Afner's Shaman package. This is the one that I use. I love it. It's great. I'll leave it in the description of the video down below. So this package also helps me keep track of debuffs and buffs on my character, including trinkets and what wolves I have out, right? What buffs I have from Elemental Blast. It's good like that. So shows everything. It's nice. It's neat. I recommend it. Another great one that I recommend is Plater Nameplates. It's a fully customizable UI enhancing add-on that allows you to create your own nameplates for players and enemies. It's great for organization and organizing information on your screen in a more coherent manner, I'd say. There's a lot going on in Mythic Plus and raiding and just WoW in general these days, and it can be pretty overwhelming sometimes. I understand when there's like 40 unit frames on your screen because your tank pulls a huge pull in Mythic Plus. You need to be able to customize which mobs are important, right? You can color code things, change the sizes of unique mobs, right? It helps. It keeps your UI cleaner and alleviates a lot of that noise, so I definitely recommend it. Another one I would recommend is obviously details. Yes, we want to see the big numbers on your screen and make fun of your friends for beating them as a non-meta class. But to be clear, details is more than just looking at damage. It helps keep track of things like crowd control, damage taken, interrupts, dispels, right? A lot more. I could go on. Being able to see these stats helps you and your friends and whoever you're playing with at the time improve as players outside of just your damage. So consider looking more closely at your teams and yourself's overall performance with other things other than damage. Details helps you keep track of that. Another great one that's in the Mythic Plus scene is obviously Omni CD. A lot of high-end Mythic Plus players play with this, and even some of the low end. This add-on allows you to track your party members' cooldowns, which is super useful when you're in an organized group or if you're in a pug and you're trying to see each other's offensive abilities. When the augmentation evoker sends his Breath of Eons, or when the priest sends their PI, you know, right? When defensive abilities have been used alongside interrupts, or when your paladin has used sack on your tank or yourself, you know that that's no longer available, right? So you're not overlapping cooldowns, you're not overlapping interrupts, you can track everything, and it just is a lot easier. And honestly, a lot less punishing when you have stuff available for either interrupting spells or incoming damage. So Omni CD, fantastic. I would recommend it. Another one to track information is Bigwigs. This helps you with boss timers, both in Raid and Mythic Plus. Helps you with the ability notifications and mechanics in the dungeon that you want to pay attention to. Bigwigs helps you with the timers, but it also can provide you with kind of like sound notifications on when mechanics are happening. If you're targeted by an ability, or if there's a frontal cone going out, like that's gonna kill you or the tank, right? Bigwigs helps with things like that. Definitely recommend it. I switched from DBM over to Bigwigs a couple expansions ago, and I just prefer it more now. A lot easier for me. Another really big Weakaura package that I would say is the Dungeon Ability Weakaura package. There's going to be one for Season 3. There was one for Season 1 and 2. If you want to get your hands on this dungeon package, if you can, I'll leave a link to it in the description down below when it's updated, and it has all of the new dungeon abilities in it. But essentially, what it allows you to do is keep track of boss abilities or add abilities like mob abilities in the dungeon that are either targeting you or the tank, something that you can avoid, right? Plays a sound. If a frontal cone is going out, you know what's happening. So I'll leave the links to those Weakauras in the description of the video down below. All right, guys, you made it to the end of the video. I'm super excited to bring this content to you guys. I've been playing Elemental Shaman and Enhancement Shaman now for a long time, and I'm stoked. It's fantastic. The season is looking great for Enhancement Shaman for both Raid and Mythic Plus, so I'm excited to see all the new faces, if there are going to be any, and if this helped you guys, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of the video. Like the video if you like it, subscribe, and hit that noti bell to see more of my content. Also, please consider subscribing to my Twitch page or Patreon. It really helps me out, creates more content like this, more higher end content like this with my editor, David. So I would really appreciate that. If you head over to my Twitch live stream page, I stream pretty much every day, if not every other day. Things have been a little busy lately just because with all the guide stuff that I want to get out for you guys, but I digress. I hope you liked the video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep going, Maelstrom on. Bye-bye. I keep fucking burping, man. Oh my God, I'm pissed off. I don't know what's wrong with me, David.